You know, if you believed the headlines right now, you'd think that people are leaving America because of one election, one politician, one moment in time. But that's not the truth. People don't sell their homes, they don't uproot their children, they don't walk away from their entire life and the entire social circle because of a single news cycle. There's something else that is happening in the world, something much quieter. And it's definitely something that's causing a mass exodus in the United States, but I don't think it's necessarily exclusive to that nation. It's like a quiet migration. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm an American that is currently living in the UK. It's been almost 3 years that I've been living here. I didn't leave the United States because I hate America. I left because I was exhausted. And I'm not remotely unique in that feeling, I don't think. When you talk to Americans who've left, you hear the same pattern over and over again. It's not one big event, it's an ongoing friction. It's decades of that underlying tension and friction that you've carried with you forever, for your whole life, or at least mostly your adult life. It's that sense that you're always that like one catastrophic event or one bad day away from losing everything that you've worked for your entire life. Healthcare, housing, your job and career, your family, the politics, all constantly grinding together in the background like some crazy, ongoing meat grinder that just never stops. And then at some point, you just stop, you take a breath, you look around, and you think, why am I living like this? I know that there are British people that can definitely identify with this because there are a lot of British people that are frustrated with things that are happening in the world. But I don't think, or at least in their nation, and they feel the need to escape. But I don't think that a lot of people outside the United States understands how deep that grind has been around for the average person living in the United States. Here in Britain, a lot of people seem to identify it as something somewhat recent, in the last decade or so. But in America, it's been at least most of my lifetime, if not longer than my lifetime, and I'm in my mid 40s. I remember my parents complaining about similar things that I was complaining about in the United States when I was little. So I don't, I'm not saying one is worse off than the other. I just want to make that distinction because I think that the part of the reason that we're seeing the mass exodus in the United States right now has a lot more to do with the ongoing, consistent struggle and no one helping, more so than one moment in time or one specific leader or one specific group of people that seems to seemingly be influencing something in one way or the other. There, I mean, for years in the United States, I tried really, really hard to make it work. I mean, I lived in the US with my British partner for almost 2 decades, plus all of the time that I spent as an adult in my career and trying to make my way and make my mark or settle in well before I met him. I did, we did everything we were supposed to do. We did everything right, legally, all the right paperwork. We got our jobs. We worked really hard. We paid our taxes. We bought the house in suburbia. We're trying to raise our family, and we were very, very grateful for everything that we had. We felt pretty good and comfortable with our life on paper. And I also want to be clear that I think that America is exceptional in many, many ways. If you win there, you can win really, really big. You know, the salaries are exponential. You can scale to the nth degree. The sense that anything is possible is pushed really, really hard in the culture. But you start to realize that it's not a meritocracy, it's more like a casino. High risk, high reward, but no safety net. And it just dawned on me after a consistent series of disappointments and letdowns and encounters and school lockdowns and school shootings in other states that were not being investigated properly, or people being held accountable properly, and a series of leaders that did nothing to help the average person living in America. Suddenly it dawns on me that I was playing a game that I could no longer afford to lose, and that I didn't want to put my family at risk for any longer. The reward wasn't enough for me. And I want to reiterate that it wasn't about necessarily who was in the White House or a specific law. It was just an accumulation of so much on my back that I just couldn't bear the weight of any longer. I don't know if I'm articulating this properly, but I feel like a lot of you out there felt that weight similarly, even if you're not an American. I mean, we had medical bills we had to worry about, housing market lately, just in the time that we've left, has moved further and further away from the average person being able to purchase a home. All the political arguments that don't just ruin Thanksgiving, they just are splitting families and couples, and people estranged from their parents permanently. That sense that if anything goes wrong, you get a bad diagnosis, you lose your job, your child gets hurt or sick, you're falling through the floor, if there is a floor. So when people say things like, oh, people are leaving because of Trump, or people are leaving because of ICE or MAGA, I actually think that is a pass. You know, that's kind of letting the system off the hook. Most people leave their homes quietly because they're tired, they're unsure, they're nervous. And I would think that there are people in the United States, like we were a few years ago, who did the math and just realized that, you know, it doesn't add up positively for us anymore. When we moved to the UK, it wasn't a victory lap, because the UK isn't perfect. It has its problems, of course. And I know a lot of the British people that are watching this might even identify with a lot of the problems I expressed, you know, that are happening in the US. But there is a level of safety net here. Yes, they are being affected negatively, and they do need to be strengthened rather than pulled out from under people, but they are here. There is a true sense of check and balance and accountability here that is not in America. We moved here not because we knew it was going to be a perfect life. We moved here because we decided that any potential material wealth that we could accumulate in America was just not worth the peace of mind that we were giving up to obtain it. And I want to be really honest about that, because that nuance, I think, is really critical. That difference between the approach of life and how the people that live in the country are affected, and the abilities they have to have the NHS, even with all its flaws, really makes a huge difference. There's no magical fairyland perfect country out there. Salaries here in the UK are often very much lower than what you could earn in the States for the same kind of work. The cost of housing is double. From my personal experience, it's double what I paid for my house in America, which was twice as big as well, with lots of land. And British people often roll their eyes at me when I tell them, how much I had and what I gave up as far as that is concerned. And as I mentioned, the NHS and other safety nets have real problems that need to be solved, of course. But the key difference for me is that America is like a high rise with no real floor, whereas the UK has a lower ceiling, but a lot of stops in the elevator, so you're not going to fall through the shaft. I don't know about that visual, but there we go. For all of the complaining and for all of its faults in Britain, believe me, British people are incredible complainers. Not positive, not negative, just very good at it. There's this basic assumption, though, that if you get sick, the system will at least try to catch you. If you have a disability or you have a special need, there are ways to get accommodations and assistance. Here, I don't have to sit awake at night and wonder if one medical bill is going to take my home. Or when I walk into a supermarket or my child's school or into town, I'm not scanning for exits or unconsciously rehearsing what I would do if someone came in with a gun. That background noise is gone here. It doesn't exist here in the UK. Not that we don't have to be vigilant, because of course crime is everywhere. You're never going to completely rid any place of crime, but you don't have that underlying feeling with you every single time you walk outside your house that this is going to be the last day you live or the last day you see your child. That background noise is gone when you leave the US. It's really difficult for people that have never lived in the United States for an extended period of time to understand. I get that. It's really, really hard. It was really hard for me as an American to understand how loud that noise even was until it was gone. So I get that it's difficult for people to understand how different it is. My partner and I have so many conversations, even now, about how hard it was to live in the US. And we're not, living the high life here in the UK. We're doing okay, but we're definitely not where we were in America. But we would still choose this life anytime. For all those reasons. You pay for freedom with anxiety when you live in the United States. But here in the UK, my taxes pay for my safety. And my safety affords me many more freedoms. At this stage in my life, with a child that I'm still raising, it's close to adulthood, and a nervous system that has been through enough for me, and I would think for a lot of my fellow Americans, that's a bargain we're willing to make. It's a sacrifice we're willing to take on. I think that's the real meaning and the real motivation behind this like mass exodus that's happening in the US. This is not to say that people that are leaving the UK or any other country don't have valid reasons or aren't feeling the same way. This is purely my commentary on what's happening in the US strictly. I've done some analysis of what I think is happening in the UK, and I'll definitely, link that video for you guys. I'll link it in the description. I won't put it in this because I'm not going to edit this. American individualism is just really, really powerful. And it can be used for good things. It can be used to build businesses. It can drive innovation. It can create new worlds. It can create some incredible, incredible moments of history and incredible success stories. But at the same time, that individual, when it's taken to its extremes, can eat a community alive. When you say things, we hear things all the time, like every man for themselves, and it sounds heroic on paper. But when you're the one who actually needs the help and you're being told, pull yourself up by your bootstraps when you don't even have any boots, that hits a little bit differently. I think that's what people in the United States are quietly noticing. And I think that that's what people outside of the United States are finally waking up to, what the life of living in the United States really is like for a lot of people. I don't think anyone that's leaves their home hates their home. I think they're just looking for somewhere where they can finally have an opportunity for something that they don't have an opportunity for in their homeland. And sometimes it's economic, sometimes it's love, sometimes it's for personal reasons, sometimes it's for just exploration, and sometimes it's to exhale and breathe. And that was my situation. So I just wanted a place I could breathe again. And in the UK, even with all this dysfunction, I think there's this still old-fashioned, you can call it old-fashioned if you want, but I think it's something that should stay with us through all the ages, this idea of fair play. The sense that we are, or at least should be, all in it together. A lot of people might, in modern times, roll their eyes at that. They complain about the government, they complain about the NHS, they complain about immigration, they complain about the trains. But underneath all of that British grumbling, there's still a social contract that people recognize, that people want to uphold. And that's oftentimes the center of why they're grumbling, that social contract feels like it's breaking. And I understand that. But from my point of view, when you compare that to the extreme way of living in the United States of you're on your own, deal with it, figure it out, even under all of the strain, that social contract feels like sanctuary. And I think a lot of Americans are finding that a lot of European countries, UK included, still have that social contract and feel similarly to how I feel. To anyone that is thinking of to anyone that's thinking of leaving the United States and watching this, as someone who's done it in their mid-40s with a child in tow, I'm going to give you some honest advice. Don't move for the weather. Don't move for expecting to get rich somewhere. Move anywhere that you want to move to make sure that it's what you're really looking for. To make sure that it's actually not politically polarized, that you do have that social contract, that there's a lower temperature life, that there is a social contract. If you feel like you're in a fight or flight mode, which I think, in my opinion, a lot of Americans are, and that's why they're exiting. That's part of the reason why we exited. You have to be willing to trade some upside. You have to be willing to give up you have to be willing to compromise a little bit. You're not going to find a perfect place anywhere. And it's very, very different vacationing in a place than living in a place, again, from personal experience. If you're British and you somehow made it through this long American woman's rant on YouTube, I don't want you to think I'm discounting your point of view or that you aren't right about the problems here, because you are. You're right to demand better from your institutions. You're right to hold your governments accountable, especially when they're taking things away from your life. And you're absolutely right to be frustrated when things aren't working, or when you feel as if you're not being listened to, or that you have to sacrifice while others don't. But realize that that's also how a lot of other people in the world are feeling, including the Americans and those who reside in the United States. I just don't want you to lose sight of what you already have. And don't underestimate the value of what you have. Don't give it up just because you think that you think it's the worst it could be, because it's not. It's definitely not. Right now, you have a society that, even in its current messy, compromised form, still values life over work more than the one that I left. And you still have this default expectation that the state, however imperfectly, has some responsibility for your basic well-being. And that's not normal everywhere. It's not like that everywhere else. And from where I'm sitting as an immigrant, expat, exile, whatever you want to call it, I think that that's worth fighting for. I didn't leave America because I stopped loving it for it. I didn't leave America because I stopped loving it, and I'm still continuing to fight for it, even abroad, as much as I possibly can in my capacity. I left because loving it was costing me my peace and costing my daughter's future. And in a real conscious and tangible way. And I just wanted to have a life back again. So I just want you to think about what you're willing to give up for peace. And it's unique and different for everybody, of course, but would you be willing to give up salary, status, comfort, to feel safe, to feel calm, to feel like your life is not one bad day from collapse? I mean, what is the price that you're willing to pay for your peace? And are you sure that the peace that you're going to find in another place is actually what you think it is? Because I know as much as I love living here in the UK, it's definitely different than I thought it was going to be. Anyway, I think that that's the real conversation underneath all of the noise about exiting. And I think that that's a very important one. Love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. I hope you stay safe. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.